All right, my friends. This is what at YU they call yeshiva bein hasemestarim. Basically, it's a play on words, usually it's between semesters. But the term for vacation in yeshiva is bein hazmanim, between the times, between the set schedules. So then they're like, oh, yeshiva bein hasemestarim, because the college also knows they're cute play on words. But basically, this weekend, we'll be away again. I'm sorry. I know. I just no, this was the planned one. This was the planned one we'd be away for Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Right, because the other was
Yeah. Basically, the agreement to move here was if Marissa gets to see her family for all the important occasions. So that was what I conceded to.
Way too full. You won't even know they did.
So I figured rather than start a new sub series, I would do a one-off, and then that way after Thanksgiving we'll do a sub series, and then New Year's we'll have another break. Oh, well, yeah. Well, am I allowed to actually take off on New Year's? That was what we dealt with last time, if you remember. In our previous year, we talked about Chukas Akum, about emulating the ways of the non-Jews, and Ramosha Feinstein had a tshuva where he said it's usher to take off for New Year's week.
Except that here, at least at schools, and in here day school, always go by all the other Parkland schools.
Right. Exactly. So right, Ramosha's argument was even if your intention is not to copy non-Jews, it's I think we got Toby's a lawyer. Toby, right? We call that a strict liability, right? Is that a correct legal term? Doesn't matter what your intention is. If you do it, you're liable.
That's correct. Yeah, that's the
Ah,
term.
okay, good. Were there any other lawyers I was supposed to give a shout out to? Okay, Toby, I'm glad you logged on for that corroboration. Yasher koach. All right, so here's the one-off.
It's
Rabbi
doing
Wiener.
nothing celebrating the Yontif.
Right, so we talked about this last time, Sheva al Tasa, if you're not active.
Batlanim sit and do nothing.
Right. So, and there's also supposed to have a Sar Batlanim, right? 10 people are just hanging around all day. What was this? So I went to Kohelet today and to Barak to meet with the heads of school. And then I bumped into some of my friends who were faculty at Kohelet. And he was telling me how he was at a convention and they were going to say a bunch of prayers for Israel. And then he was asked, and he's like, okay, it's all right if I just open up with a prayer for those who are learning in Kollel. And then they're like, oh, they're like up in arms, we're ready to throw this guy out. So he's like, yeah, it's Yikum Porkan. It's like we talk about who are Oskim Boraisa, Kol Tami Dehon, so it's so he's like, oh, you see, it's so that was this clever remark. Rabbi Weeder, you'll mark that in your liturgy book for next time. Anyway, my friends. So okay, Rabbi Weiner, I have to apologize. It's a little chazar over here, okay? I'm going to review a little bit, but we're going to cover more than I did. Basically, I had to filibuster for 15 minutes between Kiddush and Mincha this past Shabbos. So I just started sharing what I was preparing for tonight, and hopefully now I'll share everything that I prepared for tonight. This is one of those topics where, some tshuva, some Rav Moshe, you have the question, you have the answer, some analysis, and it's a very clear, cut, dry conclusion. Some of them, especially in the earlier volumes, I find, he writes like it's a stream of consciousness. And I have to constantly read and reread and hope that I'm following his stream of consciousness. So I'm going to share my stream of consciousness, which is hopefully kind of pulling his into this room over here. So the question I want to deal with, I got very interested in Eruvin because of our whole episode with the West Eruv boundary coming down and Baruch Hashem being reconstituted, and Baruch Hashem, our Schiras Rishus, our Eruv document being renewed with the mayor and with the police chief. So, by the way, also, if it's not on your calendars yet, we are going to be doing a lighting at the mayor's office on December 17th. Oh, you're good. Thank you. December 17th at 11 a.m. I have to thank the Sons of Israel Sisterhood for sponsoring a beautiful menorah. There'll be a plaque on it from the Sister of Sons of Israel. We're going to gift it to the mayor a couple weeks beforehand just to get in the office. And then we'll be doing a lighting, and we're hoping the Jewish Day School will be able to join us as well for it. And then, hopefully, this is my master
Candle.
Right, we have to get like the thick Shabbos candles for that. My hope is then in perpetuity we'll have the Chazaka doing it there because it'll be the Sons of Israel menorah. Okay, so anyway, but Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of lightings going on, and as we say with Persumei Nisa, the more lighting, the merrier, right? The more mitzvahs, the merrier. Oh, that's good. More mitzvahs, the merrier. Always like an alliteration. So the question basically was as follows. The Eruv was down, and here I am with Talia and with Layla and Marissa, and we're like, oh, dear God, what are we going to do? So fortunately, my in-laws came that week anyway. So my father-in-law kind of just walked slowly with Talia to shul when the ear was down. Oh, but wait a minute, like what if she like had a whole fit and then she freaked out? We'll talk about the halacha l'maisa at the end of it. But what about Layla? So someone said to me, oh, well, why can't you bring the baby? Isn't there a principle called chai noses atzmo? That someone who's alive, it's like they're like sort of lifting themselves already, right? Or maybe wrong. So I decided that, hey, I recall that Ramosha has a bunch of chuvos where he gets into the topic. And even if you're not studying Igros Moshe, I just took the liberty of checking out a bunch of like random OU and Torah Musings articles online. And this is a fixture in every single article on Chai Nosei Asatzmo. If you don't learn Rav Moshe on it, you're missing a really great piece of the puzzle. Okay, so in order to appreciate Rav Moshe, you see there's certain kinds of literature where they spoon feed you the material, especially like if you're reading something like the Journal of Halakha and Contemporary Society, or you're learning something like Rav Asher Weiss's Minchas Asher Tshuvos. He like kind of assumes you know nothing, and he gives you the background, and he feeds it in. So this is one of those great examples where I start looking at the Tshuva Moshe, I'm like, all right, I have to do this just like someone will study what we call Tosfos, one of the medieval commentaries on the Gemara. You need to look up the primary sources to understand what he's talking about, because he takes for granted that you know Shas backwards and forwards and Rishon backwards and backwards and forwards just like he does. And unfortunately, I'm nowhere near that. So here I am with a simple Gemara in Meseches Shabbos. The Mishnah in Shabbos and Sadi Gimel and Beis goes as follows. Hamotzi ochlin pachus mikashir bechli pater af al hakli. Shakli tfeilalo. So if I am, there's certain threshold, it's not high, a certain amount of food that if I carry that, I pick it up and I carry when there's no air, I should say no air, in a Rosh Hashanah, in a public domain, a non-enclosed area outside, then I've violated Shabbos. But what if I carry, like a few scraps? It's like below the threshold of a significant carrying. So then I only violate on a rabbinical level. So here's the thing. Wait, what if I have like a little shred of a peel of one grape? And I'm pretty sure that probably won't be enough. And it's on this chair over here. So, and I pick up the chair and I carry it outside. So, the chair is what we call a basis, which sounds like the word base. I didn't check out the etymology, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was connected to that. So the chair or the table or the tray that I put it on is tafel. It's secondary. Its purpose is to hold what was put on it. This is important for Hilchos Muksa, by the way, because let's say I take my phone, which is Muksa. Well, actually, I have to check up what category of muksa a phone is actually. It could go probably Klisha Machtalisser, I would think. All right, but anyway, I don't know, whatever the example is. Let's say I take my phone and I put it on the tray. So since I designate that tray as a holder for my phone, or another example, let's say I have a drawer that I put all my electronics in, and I want to open that drawer on Shabbos. So if it's primarily for the purpose of all the different wires and muksa items that are in there, the drawer becomes usher as well. So that works l'chumra, stringently, and also works l'kula, in a lenient direction as well, such as over here. Since there's not enough on that tray to constitute hotzah, I'm going to use that term a lot. Hotzah means transferring, carrying on Shabbos. So then, get this. Had I carried the tray on its own, I would be in violation of hotzah. But since it's secondary, right, it's tafel, it's secondary to that little, shred of grapes, whatever I put on there, I actually get off with only a rabbinical prohibition, which again, we try to keep the durabanans also, but I guess in God's great scorecard in the sky, it doesn't. You only get minus 5 points, not minus 10 points. I mean, obviously, we don't know how to calculate it, but it seems reasonable. Okay, good so far, friends on the Zoom. Making sense so far? Excellent. Thank you for the nod there, Toby. Appreciate it. Okay, so now the next part of the Mishnah is what actually concerns us. And now that we know the first part, the second part should make more sense. Esachai b'mita pater af al hamita. So if there is a human being who is alive, that's on a bed, and you carry the human, right? I feel like there's like some sort of book I read as a kid about the boy who refused to wake up and go to school, and forgot how this is going back to elementary school or something, or preschool. And then I just remember, like, eventually they carry him on his bed to school. Do you remember they have that book at
There's a
JDS?
Chelm story, but that's about,
In Chelm, you said?
there's a series of stories, the Chelm stories, and there is a
Oh,
story
yeah, it would happen in
with
Chelm.
making footprints in the snow,
Yeah, it's so okay, it could be or footprints in the sand, and that's a Christian one.
right?
Okay, but be it as it may, Shahamita Tfeilo. So here we go. If one is carrying someone who is alive on the bed, again, even though had I just carried the bed alone, I'd be in a biblical violation. Now I only transgress a rabbinical prohibition because there is a human on there. You can say, wait, why do I care? The mission that continues, it says that if he was dead, then I would be liable on a biblical level. So I don't get it. Why do I care if he's alive or dead? The point is I transferred somebody. Doesn't matter, am I chayiv for carrying his soul? No, it's not tangible. So it's the same body one way or the other. Why should it make a difference? I know I already gave away the lead, but we're building up over here. Yes, you're like, wait, didn't you just say that thing about Chai? No, so he said, yes, exactly. We're getting there. Good. That's the Gemara. Actually, even before we get to the Gemara, we just take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, first Rashi here on the Mishnah. My apologies for no handouts tonight. This was I was on the road today, so I didn't have time to do all the printing. But Torah Shabbal Peh, the oral Torah, my friends. V'ilo mechayiv al hotzoaso who mekel atzmo v'nosei atzmo. So this is the key word. Who mekel atzmo. He lightens himself. Which my understanding is that the person who we know this term called dead weight. So when what's the difference between being alive and dead? If I weigh 200 something pounds, then I weigh that same when I'm alive or dead, right? The same amount of mass is still there. So the answer is that maybe I distribute my weight differently. So I'm just not like cumbersome. And if I shift myself in certain ways, I become easier to carry. What?
It feels different.
Right. It feels different based on the distribution of the weight. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of like mystical, Kabbalistic or Hasidic approach. Because no. So long as like the neshama's in your body, it's pulling your body up a little bit. I would not be. Actually, I have this book at home, Nitzotze Hashas, which maybe I'll check it up now. It's basically a whole collection of Hasidic Vortlach on the Gemara. And Toby, who's on it from Stanford, she would you might remember some days we'd have a very like dry technical Amud of Gemara that we were learning. So then I'd pull out these Sunday shots and like just for like the shock factor or just like to raise people's eyebrows, I'd find like a cute little vart in there. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone said something along those lines. But that's not in the traditional Rishonim, medieval commentators, as far as I know. Okay, let's see the Gemara before we go to more of the medieval commentators. Let's see the Gemara. The Gemara says, Lema Masnisa and Rabbi Nassan he. Our Mishnah would seem to be in accordance with Rabbi Nassan. You might be asking, why do I care about Rabbi Nassan? Well, we'll find out what he holds in just a moment. Below Rabbanan, it's not in accordance with the Rabbanan. How so? The Tanya. We have the following Tanyatic teaching in a brisa. Amotzi behema chaya va'oflor shus harabim. If someone decides to transport is probably the right word, transport an animal or poultry to a public domain where it's forbidden to carry, bein chayin ubein shchutin chayiv. Whether it's alive or whether it's dead, doesn't make a difference. I am in violation of hotzah. That's the Rabbanan. However, Rabbi Nassan does distinguish between alive versus dead. Rabbi Nassan Omer, al shchutin chayiv v'chayin pater. If it's alive, I am exempt biblically. Whenever we use the word pater, which means exempt or not liable, in Shabbos especially, it means pater avol aser. You're exempt, but it's still forbidden. In other words, exempt on a biblical level, but it's still forbidden on a rabbinical level. So, with that being said, he distinguishes between whether the animal is alive or dead. Why? Here's our key term for the night. Shachai no seis atzmo. because one that is alive will just render it based on Rashi's interpretation. He's able to redistribute his weight. So the same thing applies to humans. The same thing applies to animals. Amarava, no. Avia Tima Rabbanan. Even the Rabbanan could concur with what it says in our Mishnah. How so? Kan lo pligi Rabbanan lad Rab Nasan el behema chayav of the misharaftin of shayu. Animals are different than humans. A live animal is going to try to get out of your hands. A live human, presumably, is not. So when we talk about children, that's actually, I'm not joking, actually. The Rav and his tshuva, I mean, not just him, earlier already deal with this question about whether a child is more analogous. I didn't bring it here tonight, but actually it's in Kuf Lamed, I think. There's a Tosas there that talks about a child before and after a bris. So there's a whole question. Is a child more analogous to a human or more analogous to an animal? So if one goes with the Rabbanan's approach that's trying to, squeeze its way out of your hands, well, a child might be more analogous to an animal in that respect. Now, I have to be careful what I say. Like someone on YU Torah is going to hear, oh, Rabbi Kurtz just called children animals. Oh, he hates children or something. There was a rabbi one time in New Jersey. He's the Rav of my brother-in-law's shul. So one time he gave a shiur. He just teaches like a weekly Hilchos Shabbos shiur. So they were learning about schita. Schita is the yitzer of extraction based on dash, of extracting the kernel from the husk. And so that's the general principle. And then there are toldos. There's applications of that. So an application could be, for instance, milking a cow. Well, milking a cow. There you go. So the same thing applies for the question of women who are pumping in halacha. So that's like all in the literature. Like anyone who learns the literature, it's like all conceptually the same thing. I forgot the name of the shiur on YU Torah, but it was something like the halachos of milking cows and women pumping or something like that. And so basically there's a whole firestorm on Facebook where all these women were like, how dare this rabbi call women animals or something like that. So now I have to be careful about this. But then my favorite comment of the night, which occurred to me, was one woman actually saw everything. She, it's like the horseshoe theory. She said, oh, wow, it's, I get the analogy now. It's like, aren't we all God's creatures in the end? Humans, animals, beautiful. So I was like, oh, there you go. You see, I appreciate that approach because they're not just being selectively liberal. They actually went the full way on it. So you know what? I give credit where it's due. So anyone who's listening to YU Torah wants to take out a soundbite, I didn't just call children animals. Okay, but as look, I'm a parent with a toddler and a little, so anyway, okay, we'll stop. They're wonderful children. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so Amarava, right? So that's what he says, that animals are different. Aval Adam Chai Denoseis Atzmo Afilu Rabbanan Modu. So even the Rabbanan will concur that human beings are different. So a live human being, everyone agrees Chai Nose Es Atzmo. Just to quickly give one last little thing in the Gemara tells us later that Rab Nassan would concede also in the other direction that if a human was bound down and was not able to be mobile, then we would not say Chayno Seyas Atzmo. Now, this is going to be really important when we think about children, and also when we think about people who might be handicapped or elderly people who have a hard time transporting themselves. So Ramosha has a tshuva on wheelchairs. But before we get to his big reveal on wheelchairs, we need to do some of the groundwork in his initial tshuva. So I have 2 volumes with me. There's actually a third tshuva about strollers that I didn't bring with me. But basically pushing strollers in a public domain is a no-no. Hence, that's why the fight for Eruv in Brooklyn and City Eruv was so contentious because the stakes were so high. For one Shabbos, Marissa had to basically stay within the confines of our apartment with Layla and with my mother-in-law, and they did fine, Baruch Hashem. But I mean, imagine being cooped up in Brooklyn in a small little apartment with a bunch of kids and never being able to get out. The stakes are really high. So anyway, that tshuva I don't have with me. But one more thing before we get to Ramosha, we have Tosfos. So Rashi tells us Chayno Siyazatso means. By the way, everything that I'm doing over here in the Gemara right now, Ramosha summarizes some of it in the tshuva. So we're actually saving ourselves some time of reading through the tshuva. We'll go to the essential part in a moment. Tosfos asks the following question. All right, Rabbi Wiener, you asked me the question on Shabbos, I remember, right? What's Tosfos' question? What's the issue with Rashi?
Make you not come.
Meaning
He lightens himself to make
Right.
he doesn't weigh less. He's just
Not only does he weigh less, but
making himself.
and let me build on. Let me take it a step further. Tosa says, "Tema lari lama pater dimishu shachai mekel atzmo falo afil b'masa kal yoser chayev." Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Who cares if he's lighter? So okay, usually he's 250 pounds. Now I don't know. He's only 200. Last I checked, if I lift something that's 200 pounds and I transfer to Rosh Hashanah, I'm still transgressing the violation of Hotah. So what? Why would Chai Nosei Atzmo be a mitigating factor? He asks. And then Tosas preempts a potential answer. One might want to say it's comparable to Shnaim Shasu. That let's say, the Sefer over here, we really want to learn Igros Moshe on Shabbos. So, well, what's my idea? So let's just say two people decide to go ahead. Abby, Amy, you both decide to pick this up together. So since you're both carrying the Igros Moshe together and you kind of splitting it, so there's no complete act of transferring on either one's end, and at least on a biblical level, it would not be an issue. So maybe Chai Nosei Atzmo is, when you think about it, Ruvain is lifting, but like Shimon is also kind of lifting himself a little bit also.
What if we throw it?
Throwing's also an issue. Throwing is also an issue. You can't throw wherever you can't carry, you can't throw. Yeah, so if you want to throw like a football through Rosh Hashanah, that's also problematic.
Oh, but what if, let's say there's a newspaper that landed in the wrong place? Do you want to just lop it over the fence because then it's within the borders of the house?
So where the newspaper full? It's oh wait, newspapers. You got into a whole other Pandora's box about newspapers on Shabbos, and then coming out from outside the Eruv. I mean, still look, when we used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, that was my. I didn't in principle cancel it. It was just that we used to pay like $12, and then it went up to $50 after our promotional ended. So I'm like, I'm not paying $50 a month for and I'm like, you know what? Now on Shabbos, I'm just basically when I have 20 minutes or something, I'm just preparing my classes for the week. So I don't even have time to do much reading anymore. But I do want to get a Morning Call subscription. When's Harry coming back, by the way?
The week this weekend.
I don't know. It's not that common anymore. There's no morning call building.
Yeah.
Still get a,
Well,
It hasn't been for a while.
I need to invite Harry because what's her name?
Yeah,
Chris Shoemaker something. She's the chief editor. So she's gonna join us for lunch on December 10th. So if it's okay, guys, I'm gonna do an abridged medrash here that day from 12 to 12:30, and then she's gonna come here for lunch. I'll
which
give
day is that?
December 10th. When I think it's Wednesday, December 10th, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love if Harry could join us, anyone's welcome to join us also. Give her, as I usually do when people come, I give them a little tour of the building, show them around, introduce them to everyone. Yeah. Because I'm only trying to figure this one out because I don't know, some rabbis are more comfortable with this others. Like I still don't do like coffee date meetings with the opposite sex or stuff. I don't feel comfortable with that. So and then I'll get lunch or something. So I'm trying to figure out how do I do this in a kosher way. So I think, I was thinking here at the shul, and it's we're having some food already. So it's anyway. That's just my nourishkeit. All right, but
Mike Pence.
yeah, Mike Pence. Yeah, I remember that guy.
We would meet with him.
Yeah, there you go. So that's so there we go. Okay, but we'll talk about yichud and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, we do have a year we're going to do a Ramosha on coeducation and all that kind of stuff. So it's all, as I always like to say, it's a future Monday night cheer. But okay, let me just finish this toast so we can get to our main event because oh wow, time flies when you're having fun. 7:44. I might have to make this a part two. I thought this was going to be a one-off, guys. All right. So Tosis basically says maybe the answer is that everything that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos is based on what was done constructively in the creation of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan that was in the wilderness. So Tosis posits that basically the animals would just move on their own, and any animals that were alive, they killed shortly before having to transfer them. So basically, you were generally transferring dead animals in the Mishkan. You weren't really transferring live animals. So therefore, it has nothing to do with I'm lighter. It's just simply doesn't map on to what was done in the Mishkan. All right, so that's Tosa's answer. There are other opinions in the Rishonim, but let's go to our featured presentation. So Over here I have Yoreh Chelik Aleph. So this is an earlier volume. It's the second volume of the Igros Moshe. And the whole first part of the tshuva, Ramosha summarizes what we just talked about. But had I just read it and did not actually learn the Gemara with Tosos, I would be a little bit confused. So that's why we did that. Now, this tshuva actually is not about transferring on Shabbos per se. It's about a shochet, about a ritual slaughterer. And the question is, if he's too weak, we're afraid that he might, it's an issue of Darsa, and he's going to accidentally kind of puncture the animal the wrong way instead of shechting it correctly. And so he gets into like a whole long tangent on in halacha. So here's where things get interesting. Ramosha suggests a novel approach, not found in the medieval commentaries, and as far as I know, not much in way of his contemporaries suggested this either. Excuse me. Mishkan Yalfinan lahachshif otsa l'malacha b'davar shemuchrach v'nikar shenasu lekan. Ramosha agrees fundamentally with Tosfos that in order, it's not Tosfos' idea, this is Hilchos Shabbos 101, that in order for one to be in violation of Hotzah, it has to be able to be mapped on to the paradigm, the paradigmatic Hotzah of what was done in the tabernacle. So what was the paradigmatic Hotzah in the Mishkan? Tikshahaya chayfetz b'rshus hayachid, da'ata hu nimsa b'rshus harabim. So when something is in a private domain, and then you find it in a public domain, nikar v'yadu l'chol shenasu lekan. It's obvious that, if my phone is here one moment, and then all of a sudden you find the phone over there in the lobby, you're going to say, I guess somebody moved it. I don't think the phone suddenly sprouted legs and walked there on its own. V'zehu chashivas malacha dehotza, kevan debelow ma'isa adam lohaya netak mimkom harishon b'chol roach evetz munach beitz hamakom shoel mi haviu lekan. So this is fascinating. Ramosha says the litmus test for if I crossed the threshold of violating Hotzah is that I do a significant enough of a transporting of it that somebody, an onlooker who looked away and looks back, will say, by golly, somebody must have moved it. And he continues, I'll skip ahead a little bit. Ubabali Chaim. Great. So now this is going to explain how we understand animals. Well, first of all, it explains live versus non-live humans. A live human can transfer himself. So even in theory, if I carry that human, if that human is capable of walking, maybe even if it's slowly on his own, so then that's what Chainose Atzma means. Since he's capable, it's not that in the very act of me lifting him, it's a lighter load. That's nothing to do with it. It's that fundamentally, this is a mobile unit. And therefore, the onlooker will not be puzzled and say, how did Shimon get from point A to point B? Reuven must have carried him because he's the only guy who's around over here. Okay? But how does this work for animals? This is where it gets a little bit, I had to read it another time to make sure I understood what he was getting at. So hopefully I'll be able to convey it correctly. Animals which do not contain the same intelligence as human beings. Now, even though you might say, wait a minute, if that's true, animals can walk from place to place too. So then I should not be in violation with someone when it comes to animals that are alive. Truth is, Rabbi Nassan would actually make that argument. But what about the Rabbanan who say that only live humans we apply Chainos Yitzatzo? Live animals, I'm in violation even if they are alive. So why is that? Because mikol makom lemakom ze lo hayu holchen v'yesh harbi makomos v'ulai rubon shema atzman lo hayu holchen l'sham below hanhagas onesias other mishum demisharafti navshayim. Since animals are not as compliant as humans, even though I've met a lot of not compliant human beings also in my time, so I'm not sure where he's going with this one over here. And I know Rabbi Wiener appreciated that one. Since animals are constantly getting away, when someone notices that the animal went from point A to point B, Yesh kan she'il laharoa. The onlooker is going to say, "Huh, kan? How'd the animal get here? Am I the adam or ba'atzman? Was it by a human being or by itself? V'mai the adam imrak hinigosa. And even if it was a human, even if it got there, the human may have had to guide it. O shehutzach lenosa. Therefore, this is what I underline here, so hopefully this is the important line. L'chein, sabi rabbanan, the rabbanan hold, shebabali chayim, when it comes to animals, lo amrina nosius atzmo, we do not apply chay nosius atzmo. Why? The nechshav shenikar b'zeh ma'isa adam, the kevin to haro, yistapik b'zeh, hu gamkin hakar l'malacha. So for the animal, since I'm going to have a question, it's not so obvious to me whether that animal would have gone from point A to point B on its own had it not been corralled by a human being. So since I even have that doubt, the human being, I can say humans have free choice. If I see Shimon was at point A and then he's at point B, I have no doubt in my mind, Shimon decided to walk there on his own. It's an odd thing that Reuven would have to carry him if he's capable of walking, even if slowly. But the animal, I think to myself, no, there's a good chance that the shepherd decided to guide him in that direction. Therefore, the Rabbanan say that Chaynos Yesatzmo would not apply to animals. He then goes on to have a very lengthy discussion about children and distinctions between different kinds of children. Are we talking about a newborn? Are we talking about a kid who is able to lift his feet a little bit? So rather than read the rest of the Tshuva in Yordia Aleph, I think he actually gets a little bit more to the bottom of the matter in going all the way to Orach Chaim Chelik Dalid. So the fourth volume of Orach Chaim, and I have a bunch of bookmarks in here. I found other interesting tshuvas. That's what's great. People use technology these days to look up things, but then you miss all the good tshuvas. It's about the friends we make along the way, right? It's about the tshuvas we find along the way. For instance, I have this one over here on V'sein Talamatar, which will be relevant soon because we'll switch over to that in the beginning of December. And there's someone who basically said that we had the wrong cheshbon, we didn't calculate it right, and so half the tshuva is literally him just castigating this person for suggesting, oh, so you think you're like smarter than like all the medieval scholars and Rishonim and scholars? Like, you got it right. It's a great piece. If only I found it earlier, I would have put it in the Pirkei Avos. But that's why we have second editions, right? Mm-hmm. Don't tell anyone I'm already planning that. Okay, but to our actual tshuva. So yeah, now the nice thing about getting business cards printed is that now I have a nice bookmark I can use. So this is the fancy stuff I got. So that way when I'm at like all these places, and okay. Anyway, all right. So Ramosha in Orach Chaim Chelik Dalit says as follows, and I realize I technically have 7 minutes on the clock, so I'll try to kind of keep it to the essentials. Ramosha says, so if I were to ask you, what is more likely to qualify for Chayno Seis Atzmo? A toddler or an elderly person who has difficulty walking? Who is more likely to be what we would call independent and would qualify for Chayno Seis Atzmo?
I'm going to say the toddler.
You say the toddler? You say the elderly?
I said the toddler.
Toddler?
The other way.
2-2.
Okay. Well, so I'll give you what Ramosha says on this one. What was that, David?
Maybe the elderly person, because the assumption is that his movements are more self-determined, while the children is more led by others.
Interesting, right? Like the analogy to the animals we're talking about before. That the children are less deliberate. Yeah, so good. No, sorry, what was that? Yeah. So with Rav Moshe's approach, that might be true. But if we go back to the classic, we were just like to stick with Rashi's approach. It's all about lightening the load. So he says, L'chora hu dafka b'kanshizo halichaso, that a child who needs help, who needs like to hold a parent's hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're incapable of walking. Many times it's mitzad yerasa, that it's because they're afraid of walking. Sometimes they just need the social pressure. I remember for Talia, we had her, not in camp her first summer when she was, I guess, close to 2 years old. And then the first day of this, literally the first day of the semester, she went back to daycare with fellow 2-year-olds who were walking. She comes home and she takes her first steps. I remember watching them. I remember sitting, in like a chair and I'm like by my little like library nook, and I look up and she's like, I'm like, oh, it's happening! Like, making a video. So, but all she needed, she was capable of it. She was just afraid. She was like always needed, and like even when I would hold her hand, I would just have a finger and I like let my arm droop. So she was literally just for psychological support. So, this a toddler we're talking about who's capable of walking is different than someone who might be elderly. Now, what do we mean by elderly, right? Like there's it's all a spectrum, right? Here, I should be careful over here, right? Okay. There's no elderly people in front. Okay.
Where you draw the line.
Yeah, very good.
If I'm helping a handicapped person, people do this, like in a marathon or walking. So if he's somewhat capable of walking, and I'm holding on to him, we're walking together.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear that we're walking together. But as he deteriorates, he's almost not walking at all.
Yeah.
At what point to say, oh, this is it?
Right. He doesn't bring this up, but in Hilchos Shmona Esrei, so one has to stand when davening Shmona Esrei. So if one has a shtender in front of them, you're not supposed to put all your weight on the shtender. If the shtender was moved, one would fall down. So he doesn't bring that up actually, but it just like on the fly that occurred to me that's also kind of like a litmus test. Anyway, so let's see so he actually distinguishes between two kinds of elderly. Other gadol hilucho hu rak b'siyua kabayim. Hari afim aydezeh yagbia ha'achas v'yaniach ha'achas. Hari ein zeh kederech hilucho sheyitzarach lios am kazeu bazim mikoach kvedosh in lo koach lahako atzmo. So, let's say we're talking about whether we're talking crutches, right? So here, this is different than a toddler because this is fundamentally not derech hilucho. This is not the way one walks. The toddler is a little bit uneasy, but it's still called derech hilucho. That is the standard manner of walking. Here, by using this kind of aid, that's not called walking per se. And again, not all cases are equal. If he's actually able, I think like he's also talking about maybe if one has a walker, is able of actually like lifting his feet on his own, but just needs some extra support. That's one thing. But like if you have some like crutches or something, he's actually not able to lift his legs at all. He's using his torso and upper muscles in order to move himself from place to place. So he says there is a distinction. If someone can't move his legs at all and just needs his upper body strength to move from place to place, clearly that's worse than a toddler. But even someone who is able to move his legs a little bit, he still says that's better, but that's not as good as the toddler, according to Ramosha. So you might be wondering, well, let's say an Eruv is down. What recourse does an elderly person or handicapped, it could be a young person who's handicapped, whatever, someone who needs it, what recourse do they have to get to shul? Now, keep in mind, by the way, we didn't do this tshuva yet. There's a tshuva of Rav Moshe about a seeing eye dog in shul, about someone who's blind. And actually, when I go back for the book, God willing, I want to I don't think I'm going to write this one as a separate article. I think I actually just want to kind of add this to my article on the seeing eye dog, because Ramosha's argument for leniency there, without spoiling the whole shiur, one of the considerations is that this person's not going to be able to make it to daven in shul. Not just simply he won't be able to fill his obligation, but he's going to lose the whole Jewish experience if he can't make it.
Is this with an Eruv, or is it something nothing?
This is just about some people thought it was anathema to bring an animal into shul.
Rabbi Davies in Cherry Hill has a congregant who comes with a seeing eye dog.
Well, Rav Moshe's tshuva is the precedent for that. Yeah. But as I said, a future Monday night shiur. Yeah. We got lots of great stuff lined up, my friends. But just to bring this to a conclusion, because we're at 8:00, he says, okay, crutches or walkers, that's one thing. Avalafinius daiti, yesh tam gadol lahatirosh yeshiv al kisei im ofanayim, which is a wheelchair. A wheelchair that he can roll on his own, or maybe, he talks about maybe a non-Jew doing it. If he can roll it on his own, that would be even better. And now actually we have grandma scooters, which that's a whole other shear, but basically with grandma technology and then an indirect way of turning it on, electricity is only considered rabbinically prohibited. Indirect actions are rabbinically prohibited. It's trade through Rabbanan. So shvus the shvus, as we call it. So that's what many people do in Eretz Yisrael today, and some of it's starting to be brought to America over time as well.
So the wheelchair isn't considered carrying.
And why not? Elohu kibeged. There's already discussion in Tosfos about a cane, about someone who needs a cane to walk, and under the right parameters, that might not be Otzah. But Moshe says it's even better than a cane. He says, why? Because the cane is like still, you're holding it. Here, the wheelchair is like his beged. It's like his clothing, right? We wear clothing even when the Eruv is down, because it is like that Mishnah we saw. It's tafel to our body. It's secondary to our body. That's why when people want to carry their keys when there's no Eruv, they get this special belt buckle, and the key is actually functionally part of the belt. That way, it's part of the clothing. That way, it's not carrying. So Moshe says actually the wheelchair is fundamentally like his beged. And he says, look, even in certain circumstances, he talks about whether somebody would be able to use a non-Jew to help mitigate certain things, getting him over a threshold, for instance. And he writes, but again, this to me is one of the key lines in here, is that he says, if this is like the Zeta wants to make it to the bar bas mitzvah, well, he wouldn't say the bas mitzvah, but right, I'm just kind of putting my own in there. Go to a family simcha at shul or nufra or something on Shabbos, and he's not going to be able to. So just again, I point this out every time. Notice how he takes he doesn't necessarily give a blanket dispensation. Family matters more than everything else. Let's throw the Torah into the trash can, like Chas v'shalom. That's not what he says. But it's a consideration that when you have different opinions on the table, the fact that he's taking that into consideration in his halachic calculus, that's something worthwhile. And God willing, we'll hopefully see that in the Seeing Eye Dog Tshuva. Maybe we'll do that as the next one. Who knows? All right. Thank you for coming, my friends. Wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, a Freilichen Thanksgiving. All right. Good night, guys.